it took us a while to kind of actually arrange this because you're a busy woman and we had lots of scheduling conflicts and that kind of thing. So I'm so happy that you're here. So tell us, we want to go straight in.
Boy.
You've recently started a Substack.
I did.
And it's basically called Unstoppable Female Founders.
It is.
Can you tell us more?
Of course. First and foremost, thanks for having me and being patient with my ridiculous schedule at the moment. I appreciate it. So the newsletter I started about 6 weeks ago, and it's kind of a long time coming, I think. It really kind of started as a bit of research 2 years ago, and I had this crazy idea to build my own SaaS platform. I've been working to build and grow and scale other people's SaaS platforms, had this idea, that's what I was going to do. And when I started really getting into the research behind what it would take, ultimately, you always land on capital. So what's my fundraising journey going to look like? Who are the investors that I'm going to have conversations with? Who's going to be on my hit list? And the more and more I started diving into that, I started finding these shocking stats around what it was taking female founders to actually raise capital. I think it's something that is coming to light a lot more in probably the last 12 to 24 months. But it's something that a lot of people, I think, don't realize is that out of roughly 540 billion in venture capital deployed globally, less than 2% of that goes to female founders. It's absolutely shocking. And I couldn't get over that stat, and it just kept bowling over in my head constantly. And one of the other things too is that in an actual fundraising process, if you do land that pitch with a VC or an investor, is that the propensity for you as a female founder to be asked preventative questions is roughly 66%. Whereas male founders who are raising in the pitch process, 67% of the time get asked promotion questions. And for those who don't know what the difference is between the two, is that a preventative question is one that says, how will you not fuck this up, excuse my language, but how will you not lose absolutely everything, including our investment? Whereas a promotion question that male founders get asked, it's about how big can you take this? How big of a return can we see on our potential investment? So right within that, it's biased towards men, biased against women and favors men in that pitch process. And there's a fantastic TED Talk actually by Data Kans that really, I think, inspired me. And she's an organizational behaviorist at the London Business School. So she kind of really is in the weeds on sort of this type of thing. And it was really quite inspiring. And so that was, I think, the initial spark of like understanding what the problem was for female founders when it came to raising investment. And then secondarily is that all throughout this year, I've had the opportunity to actually host dinners for groups of female founders. And I sat at a lot of these tables, being the host, not being a female founder myself, but listening to their stories and hearing the whys behind why they started their business, understanding their passion for their business, but then also to understanding the heartbreak of the challenges and the biases that they were experiencing, being told that their business wasn't going to work. And again, the fundraising process and just how many women ultimately almost lost their businesses because they came so close to not getting that investment. And that was just a really huge talking point. And it, I think, really then instituted the fact that I wanted to do something to help move the needle on that lowly 2%. And it only took, I think, more recently for me to really pull the culmination of all of these thoughts together and figure out, all right, what is it that I can do to leverage my own skill sets to be able to build a platform that then empowers and hypes up these female founders and also provides a platform for them to secure, again, more investment for their startups. And I believe that like there's no reason why female founders can't swing for the fences and be just as bold and just as ambitious and have just as much global impact, both financially and from a sustainability and a climate perspective, as male founders who are raising. There's no difference, except for the fact that we innately, as women, we don't advocate enough for ourselves. And again, spending my whole life hyping up other team members or friends or female founders, I was like, this is one thing that I know I'm really great at, is helping others realize the potential and what's within them, and really being able to push them outside of their comfort zones to achieve something great. And so I wanted to really bring that all together. And the first piece of it is the Substack and the newsletter, so Unstoppable Female Founders. Next will be actually hosting events, and I really want to like build a digital platform as well for community, for networking, for support. And I think ultimately my goal would be to be able to drop female founders from that name and just call it Unstoppable. I think that the fact we have to even frame ourselves as female founders or female VCs or any minority group, right, have to specify rather than just saying we're founders is a bit of a shame. And I want to, again, get to the point where we have parity, where women can just say, I'm a founder. They don't have to specify that they're a female founder.
From a layman's perspective, the question I really wanted to ask you was, from what you're seeing, and also, you know, the fact that this is openly spoken about, and there are lots of advocates who are actually pushing this forward because the statistics are horrendous, especially for a female or a minority in terms of getting funding. Do you feel optimistic about how things are going to be in the next 5-10 years? Or what's your kind of editorial or this kind of viewpoint?
I think there are two sides of this coin, and I have two, I think, different trains of thought around it. I think on one hand, it's really disheartening because you're now seeing actually a lot of female venture capitalists lead the space. There's roughly 16% of general partners at VC firms are women, and that is slowly decreasing year on year. There was a really fantastic article by Sifted just a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, that explicitly delved into this particular problem. And I think that with more female VCs leaving, I fear that the struggle for female founders to secure capital will also decline. And again, you know, we're human. When the mountain gets tough, like we do have a propensity to sort of like say, is it even worth it? So there's that side of things. But then the forever optimist in me says, I'm completely optimistic about it. I think there are more conversations now than ever before around the need for backing female founders, and not just female founders, but female leaders. You know, you've got the rise of some fantastic organizations like Chief that originated out of New York. You've got Allraise, you've got Albright. You've got a couple of organizations that are really doubling down on supporting and backing women, because it's not just great for those women in their communities, but it's great for us on a global capacity. I mean, the stats also don't lie. When women actually do secure funding, they 5x the return back on the investment for their investors. So that's why for me, it's just like, it's shocking that women aren't securing more investment, given the fact that statistically speaking, it makes so much more business sense for investors and in my opinion, I think the global economy at scale. So I think I'm a forever optimist, and I am very, very positive about, I think, the direction where things are going. Again, the groups that are there to support, you've got all of the advocates there. You've also got, I think, a large recognition, both from like the corporate worlds, who are now implementing initiatives within their DE&I space, but then also too simultaneously, you've got the entirety of, I think, the startup ecosystem, both from a founder perspective and an investor's perspective, who are really starting to champion the need and the requirement for female founders.
Good. I think this almost deserves a podcast series in its own right, which you definitely should create.
Well, thank you very much. I have may or may not been giving that a little bit of thought, so thank you for the encouragement.
So you heard it here first, folks.
Yes. And I will credit my entire podcast to Suds.
Thank you. And Natalia over there.
And Natalia, of course, for the help. Much appreciated.
Who may not be around for much longer.
If he doesn't want you, I'll take him. How about that?
Take her. No, so essentially, you know, for those of you who may not be aware, Jen's actually from the home of capitalism, America.
Yeah, that will be true.
And, you know, so you came to the UK as a marketer, and we want to kind of explore that in more detail, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
And also, I mean, like, I think one thing I noticed is working with so many different marketing teams and so many different CMOs and digital marketing directors, it's, we're kind of being paid to have our interest in a certain thing and then move on to something, a campaign. It could be a Christmas campaign or a Halloween campaign, and then a Thanksgiving campaign, and then you move on. From the sounds of it, from an objective perspective, you've stumbled upon an idea that kind of, I guess, consumed you to the point where you're actually so passionate about doing something about it. Would that be fair? Or?
No, absolutely. And I think this is where my background as a marketer really takes effect, right? Because I have an idea that I'm deeply passionate about, and I now know how to execute it based off of my historical experience of building, growing, and scaling, and more importantly, marketing organizations. And I think that one of the big factors and one of the core focus areas for marketing, especially in today's day and age, at the B2B level anyway, is building communities. And that's essentially what I'm after. So it's leaning into my background, my knowledge, my experience to execute on something that, in my opinion, has or will have great impact on women around me, hopefully on the world around me, but also too, more importantly, I think that I look at it as legacy. I want to be able to sit back one day and say, I built that. I was able to put forward my skill sets in a way that helped amplify, again, the voices and the businesses of these female founders. And I've been called a little bit a psycho for thinking this, or a little bit of, again, narcissistic and overly optimistic. But I truly believe that I have the capabilities of moving the needle on that 2%. And I really deeply, truly believe that, if we empower more women, not only in leadership roles, but female founders, and empower more women to take control of their own personal finances and get into investing, that we have the capabilities of putting more women into government positions that hopefully can advocate and support for better governing laws and regulation that are to the benefit of women and other minority groups.
I mean, essentially, I think at one point every human being sees something which is unfair, and if it's within your power to change it, then you should definitely do it. I want to talk to you more about your marketing career.
Go on.
And we've got a whole series of questions that we want to ask you. In terms of your career itself, you started off in the world of marketing. What kind of things have you seen change from when you first started to where it is now? I know we kind of spoke about this before we hit record, but I would love to know more about what you have seen from your personal perspective.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you have to understand that I'm old and I have a very long career.
Old now.
Put this into perspective, an almost 20-year career. Yeah. So when I started out in marketing, again, nearly 2 decades ago, especially because I've always worked in the B2B space. So I've actually never really worked for a B2C organization, at least not a solely B2C organization. Back in the day, B2B marketers were focused on their email database. They were focused on email, display media buys, affiliate marketing, and some of the basics. And when you take a look at what's happening today, you have so many more B2B brands that are very reminiscent of a B2C brand. They're taking bold risks. They're thinking outside of the box. They're not afraid to have a personality when it comes to their marketing and their brand efforts. These are things that, you never saw before. Gone are the days of the tired corporate brand and their stale playbook, right? Not to mention, in roughly the last 2 decades, you've had a massive rise in all things Google. You've had obviously the massive rise in social media platforms that were never part of our ecosystem roughly 15 to 20 years ago, right? So we've had to, as marketers, adapt to new technologies in a way that I don't think really any other department has had to, because we've got to make sure that we're staying on top of our existing channels. Plus, we've got to do the research to figure out, what is this new channel? How does it impact my business? How do I interject myself into this channel? That's the rise of Facebook. That's the rise of Instagram. Now we've got TikTok. And with every introduction of new channel, that's a learning process that a marketer has to go through. And these are things that we really weren't hard pressed about back in the day. And now obviously the whole world is talking about AI and the impacts that AI will have. I think that's a conversation that was nowhere on the radar when I started. Now we've got entire marketing teams that are functioning off the back of AI, whether or not it's for efficiency, whether or not that's for actual content or image production, whether or not that's for full-scale strategy creation, right? There is an AI for literally everything inside of the marketing ecosystem. And so I think it's been a really cool journey. It's been fast-paced and it's been really rapid, but I think that in today's day and age, a marketer has to cover so much more ground than what we had to cover back when I started. Now you're thinking about like, all right, well, how do we build purpose into our brand? How do we think about corporate social responsibility? How do we think about growing a community around our brand as opposed to just explicitly selling and marketing our product or our service? So I think that so much has changed within that. And the marketing department, obviously I'm biased, but I think the marketing department has had to really adapt and evolve in a way that I don't think many of the other departments inside of the startup world anyway have really had to tackle.
So I guess it's almost becoming harder than ever, but in a good way, because you've not only the minimum requirements, so you've got to have a good product to start with, you've got to have genuine CSR, for example, or you've got to have something which is authentic that people can kind of buy into, I guess. And I guess that kind of leads me to the next one in terms of you've kind of been able to market from North America to the UK to EMEA, and we speak to a lot of marketing managers or marketing directors who are in the same position. What advice would you give to someone who's, I don't know, maybe going from the UK to the US or maybe the other way around?
Well, I mean, very simple advice is don't rinse and repeat your playbook. Just because it works here doesn't mean it will work there, and vice versa. And I think that time and time again, you see organizations do that. They make this generalized assumption that just because they speak English on both sides of the pond, that they'll behave the same, or, the buyer or the user will engage the same way. And that's a major misstep because you're not taking into consideration the cultural nuances, both on a personal level, because again, we're constantly marketing to another human as opposed to a business, even in the B2B world. So you've got cultural nuances both at the personal level, but then also too in the professional level. And for, the last few SaaS businesses that I've worked for has been inside of the SEO industry. And this was like one of the major key elements that we figured out very, very quickly is that even though everyone we were essentially marketing and selling into were search engine optimization professionals, the way in which they approached the craft in the US was fundamentally different to the way that they approached the craft in the UK, which then continued to be different in other geolocations across Europe, the Middle East, and the rest of the world, right? So if you're not taking those nuances into consideration, I think you're massively going to trip yourself up and fall. And that doesn't even begin to tackle that a lot of these localized markets, they want to be spoken to in their local language. And it's not a one-for-one translation, right? So there's a major misstep there as well. It's funny too, because like being an American that's lived in London for roughly the last 8 years, and then I've continually worked here for probably about 5 years before that, is that you see culturally, Americans are known for being loud and boisterous and pretty out there and flashy and very social individuals. I am guilty of all of those things despite living here for 8 years. But that is reflective inside of advertising in the US. It's loud, it's flashy, it catches your eye, it plays into the ego a little bit, right? Whereas marketing and advertising here in the UK is very, very different. Again, the words and the copy might be in English, but Brits are far more reserved. They're far more conservative in nature. Brits would much rather die, like combust, explode, than accidentally make eye contact with another human being on the train, right? So like that just goes to show like the fundamental differences there. And that's why in British advertisements, you see this far more subtle or humble approach that sort of leans into that dry British humor that we all know and love. And so again, they both speak English. We both walk and talk effectively the same way, but we behave differently as users. We are attracted to fundamentally different types of copy, different types of positioning, messaging, etc. So when those things aren't taken into consideration, I think it's just a recipe for disaster.
Wow, so that's an amazing answer.
Sorry, I'm also very verbose, another trait of Americans, I think.
Mic drop at this moment. I want to get more into the kind of things that you've been speaking about online.
Yeah, all right.
We want to get
How far back did you go? Because I have some serious rants.
We actually wanted to kind of pick out, I think every marketer I've been, a lot of marketing folks I've been speaking to, they have kind of progressed in their career to where they are at the moment. And I think as long as someone is kind of always progressing and growing and getting to their final state, I guess, or wherever they are at the moment, we try to get a feel for what they're like. So I kind of did my research on your posts. Essentially, you mentioned celebrate the little wins, no matter how small. Can you expand on this and give us some examples if you can?
Happily. So this one is one of my favorites. It's something that I have really been preaching my entire leadership career. So from the moment I was entrusted with teams of marketers, I believe that we fundamentally should always celebrate the small wins. Like no matter how small, celebrate the win for a number of different reasons. That small win, it starts the ball rolling. It builds momentum. More importantly, it also builds confidence in the person who you're shouting out that small win for. And psychologically, we as individuals, that creates a hit of dopamine when we're shouted out or when we're celebrating that win. And that impacts our motivation. It impacts our energy levels. It impacts the tenacity and the intentions for which we're doing our work. And so that's what I believe, like celebrating the wins, no matter how small, are so fundamentally important when you're in a leadership role. And I was literally just telling somebody the other day, one of the things that I always love doing with my marketing teams is that immediately, first rule of thumb, set up a kudos channel in your Slack. Like that channel should be nothing but you and the wider team shouting each other out for those small wins. There's something also very important about shouting out your team members in a public domain and in a public capacity for their fellow colleagues to see. It actually helps support a very positive promotional culture and team building where each other has each other's back, and there's this supportive network and this entrust that builds inside of your organization when you as the leader are shouting out others, and then you get other team members to jump on board and shout out each other. It just massively strengthens those relationships between colleagues. And I'm a fundamental believer that it's people that drive organizational growth.
Yeah.
If you can be a strong leader that creates a fantastic culture that people are excited to come to work every day and give their best selves into that work every single day, that there's absolutely nothing that you can achieve. And that starts with, again, something as small and what for a lot of people feels insignificant. That's celebrating those small wins collectively and individually.
Can you give us an example of a small win that you recently celebrated? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, actually, it's just launching my Substack newsletter, if I'm completely honest with you. It's something that I think has been in the back of my head and the back of my mind for a very long time. But, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I'll always overthink everything. And I just found every reason to not hit publish. And then I finally hit publish. And I was like, oh, wow, that wasn't so bad now, was it? So for me, it was the small one of just feeling confident enough to hit publish on week 1, and then week 2 and week 3. And now we're going into week 6.
Yeah, I've been following your Substack, and I really like the fact that, you have strong opinions and you're not afraid to express them.
And that is an understatement, but thank you.
And I feel like the world needs more in terms of,
thanks.
I think if everyone spoke, said what they thought, obviously to an extent, you know,
within reason.
Within reasons, of course. You know, the world would be more connected, better place because you are actually walking around with the truth, and you're like, okay, so this is what someone thinks. One very interesting thing you said about celebrating small wins. This is a completely unrelated topic to the genre of this podcast, but I was actually listening to a podcast called where they had invited a divorce lawyer to come in.
Oh boy!
And he gave tips on how to, you know, kind of pay compliments to your wife or significant other. And his tip was actually, he said, look, you can do this almost straight away. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. He suggested that you leave a Post-it note to your wife or your husband on small things that they did really well. So it could be, you made me feel wonderful yesterday when you rang me, or that, you know, and it was there's something there in terms of we are human beings after all. And this is how the human being operates. These are the kind of things you can do too.
So it's so interesting you say that because I wouldn't call myself an enthusiast, I guess, but I'm massively intrigued by psychology as a marketer, right? So like, why do we do the things that we do? Like, why do users behave in the way that they do? And there is something to be said, and there's a lot of research behind this around just gratitude and appreciation. And think about it. When somebody says, I appreciate you, or I appreciate the thing that you did, it literally lights up your neurons, right? It drops that bit of dopamine and it makes you feel valued. It makes you feel seen. It makes you feel appreciated. And that's why I say celebrate the small wins, because whether or not it's in your personal life or it's in your professional life, obviously we're talking about marketing in a professional capacity, but it absolutely makes somebody feel valued and seen. And that goes so far in this world. But then also you as the individual who has given that compliment and shown that gratitude, you also receive a tremendous amount back on a personal capacity.
So whether you're in marketing or you're facing a very difficult time in your relationship, leave Post-it
notes, give thanks, say I appreciate you.
Maybe me, you know, like if you're going through problems with your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend and husband, you should set up a WhatsApp channel just dedicated to giving each other compliments. You know, that's
actually a great tip.
Top tip.
So we've now moved away from a marketing podcast and we're moving into couples counseling.
Couples counseling, exactly.
All right, that's our next podcast series we're going to launch.
High five there.
Yes.
I want to go, getting back to the script. Have I gone red here?
Yes, you have. It's
fine. Firstly, we do appreciate you being here.
And I'm humbled, so thank you.
And we are grateful you're here. So playing to your gratitude thing. Next up, what makes a great story?
This is another one. You have to think all the way back. Like, storytelling is in our DNA as humans. It's how we transferred knowledge. It's how we maintain traditions. We told stories from one generation to the next, right? I mean, the entire success of Walt Disney is predicated off of storytelling. We as humans are naturally drawn into a beautiful story being told, whether or not that's the human story or that's a brand story or that's, you know, a story of how things have come to be, you know, throughout history. Like, we're just naturally drawn into a great story. And I think, like, we as marketers are some of the best storytellers in this entire world. I actually follow a gentleman named Robbie Crabtree, and his entire business is actually built on helping founders and startups actually craft their story. And that's one of the things that I think it is so vitally important, is like being able to be a great storyteller as a marketer.
In terms of, you know, if we were to apply this to anyone who's maybe fundraising, you know, what would be how would you use storytelling to raise investment? You know, what are the kind of things storytelling elements that you can include in your pitch deck, for example? And anyone who's watching from, you know, who's trying to raise money, for example.
This is a fantastic question, actually, because it's something that recently I also ranted about, as you know, digging through my posts.
I wouldn't say you spoke about it from experience.
Yeah,
you know.
I think when it comes to storytelling in the fundraising process, it's very important to that the story is going to be fundamentally different based off of the maturation position that your company is at in their fundraising journey, right? So if you have a very early stage startup that's going for, say, like pre-seed or a seed round, 9 times out of 10 is that they don't have the data and the metrics to be able to prove what they've accomplished to that point in time, right? So that's where storytelling becomes really, really crucial for the founders around why have you built this business? What is driving you? What's the passion behind you building this business? And more importantly, why are you and the founding team the ones to actually bring this business to the world? What is it with your experience, your background, your knowledge, your education that's going to make or allow you to be the individual to be successful solving that problem? And so that's the story that you have to craft in your pitch deck for investors to get them to buy into the reasons why they will or they won't give you that investment. But then when you take a look at a company that's a little bit further down the road in their growth journey, so say a company that's looking to go for like a Series A, B, C, or some of the more significant rounds, these guys have the data, they have the proof points, they can directly say, these are our revenue metrics that we've seen over the last 12, 24, 36 months, however long the company has been in business. They can directly point to these and say, this is how successful we have been, and this is how we're going to be successful in the future. So their story is more of a data-driven story, and the story is then about what we've done as well as what we're going to do next with the investment that we hope that you'll give us.
Perfect. In another world, personally, I've worked with a number of startups and first-time founders, from a variety of backgrounds, and often they get so, I have to really kind of coach some people through. Often they get so kind of overwhelmed with features and encryption is the best one because it's 658 gigabytes or terabytes or whatever it may be. Whereas, the thing people care about is, why are you doing this?
Yes.
What problem are you going to solve for me? So that's something that we definitely have to kind of really try and remind people a lot. The other thing, going back to what we first started talking about, you're passionate about anything and everything to do with the world of investing. And you're also passionate about bringing to light the fact that women are underrepresented in this world, in both sides of the coin, I guess. I guess the question from my side is, why are women missing out by not investing?
Oh boy. So this is a big one. And again, I guess I'll say, I'm passionate about it now because, again, as I started doing the research and really uncovering how grave the disparity is for gender equality within investments, it really just ate at me and kind of, for lack of better terminology, it enraged me, right? In doing the research, found out that roughly women in the UK alone, this isn't even a global stat, it's strictly just women in the UK, last year left roughly 600 billion pounds on the table by not actively investing. Oh, wow. That's a stat that came out of an Albright article that I read, and I was just gobsmacked. I was like, are you joking me? That is a sizable amount of money. And I think what a lot of people neglect to realize is that in today's day and age where, we are really striving for parity with male genders in a number of different areas, women were only given the right to open up a bank account in 1975. So that's not all that long ago. Before that, you had to have a male signatory in order to open a bank account. So finances, whether or not it's personal finances or the finance industry as a whole, has always been considered like a man's world, if it will, right? Finances have always been left to the man, especially when we're talking about gender roles in the home, right? Men always handled the finances, women always handled the children and the cooking and the cleaning and the typical household chores, if it were. And I think that in today's day and age, there's definitely a lot of fantastic resources that I've come across. So there's an organization called Female Invest. They're constantly creating great resources. Their entire business exists to educate women about the benefits of investing. But I think there's a number of things that really also go into it, such as, we naturally are risk adverse as women, far more so than men are. But I think the biggest thing is that there's just a lack of representation. And we know that representation matters in this world. If we can see it, we can believe that we can become it. And I think that that's a big thing. As I said earlier, only 16% of general partners at VC firms are women. So that isn't overly encouraging for other women to think, let me get into investment. I think now you've got a lot more women dipping their toes into angel investing when it comes to investing in businesses. But I think that that's, again, a massive gender disparity that we have. And I think we're at a pivotal point where we do have a lot more women recognizing, I want to take control of my finances. Like, I don't want to just rely on traditional norms and rely on the fact that maybe my husband might be taking care of our finances. Like, I really want to take control for myself, educate myself, and make sure that I'm in a position that I'm doing the most with the capital that I have at my disposal.
Is there I guess the follow-up question to that would be something like, is this simply about like financial literacy or, kind of, or is it about recognizing biologically maybe we have certain predilections that we must fight? Well, I guess once you become aware of it, you're in a position to change it.
No, it's exactly that. It is exactly that. It's both sides of the coin, right? It's financial literacy. I think we've all seen a changing of the tides around like what is taught in schools post lockdown and the pandemic, right? And understanding that a lot of life skills that we need as adults in today's environment are not taught in school. So financial literacy across the board, male, female, irrespective, right? But then also to your point as well, it's understanding that there are innate natural instincts that prevent women from being as bold and taking those risks. And again, we are naturally risk adverse just by the nature of being women. Now, you could go down the rabbit hole of why that is. Is that a nature versus nurture type of situation? How women or girls are raised versus boys. So that's a whole nother podcast we could get into. But I think it's both sides of that coin, right? It's the need for more financial literacy, especially when it comes to, women investing, but then simultaneously as well, acknowledging and recognizing the things that are already against us naturally, just again by our innate nature of being women.
Wow. On that note, you should definitely be reading Jen's Substack, Unstoppable Female Founders. The links will be on the show notes below and everywhere we post this. I want to kind of get into more non-marketing and more questions about you as a person.
Gosh, this is when it gets scary.
Actually, firstly, I should really have asked you, which part of the US are you from? Where did you grow up?
Drum roll, because I know everyone is going to come out with commentary around this. I grew up in Florida.
Okay.
So yes, everyone can now Google.
You're
Google
a Florida woman.
Man. Florida woman, exactly.
There was a thing on Reddit that I saw where you Google Florida man, woman, and your date of birth,
Correct.
and then it'll tell you,
Correct.
So
I mean, if there's some wild, insane, just ridiculousness that pops up in the news, 98% of the time, it happened in Florida.
Wow. I mean, growing up in Florida, did you see many of these crazy things happen with your own eyes?
I think you just aren't aware of it when you're in it. You know what I mean? Sadly to say, that's just your normal. It's only when you remove yourself from the situation that you're like, holy wow, that is a bit crazy. You're like, that's not normal.
Does it ever get to a point where, you've lived here for 8 years now, to the point where there's a Florida man story or woman story that comes up and you're like, oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
On a regular basis. I've got a few friends that no longer live in Florida as well. And so we trade back and forth wild Florida stories. And whenever you read them, you just think to yourself, of course it's Florida. Of course.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We probably will be sending you screenshots of Florida news that we see, so
go for it.
Apologies in advance.
I love it because it's great humor and entertainment.
It is, and the thing is, it's become a phenomenon in its own
100%, yeah.
kind of right, and it's become a meme. So it's put Florida in the map more so than Disneyland, I guess. This is the world of Disney. Did you ever go to Disneyland?
Oh yeah, like growing up, we had season passes, so annual season passes. So Disney was all the rage.
3 must-read books.
Okay, so I'm a voracious reader. Like when I say I read a lot, I daily spend time reading. I love reading, but I'm a hard reader. I don't do Kindles or any of that. So for me, this is a really hard question. I think ones that pop into my mind, one that all the marketers will probably know and love is Start With Why.
Start With A, yeah.
Simon Sinek. I mean, anything that man writes, I just absolutely absorb. Another really, really memorable book that was recommended to me a few years ago that I had no idea what it was about, considering the title of the book is Let My People Go Surfing.
Oh, wow.
It is by the founder of Patagonia, Ivan Coulthard. My apologies, I probably just butchered his surname. But it's a fantastic story of him starting Patagonia through his love and passion for the great outdoors and climbing. But it's a story about building culture and building culture with passion. So again, as a marketer and somebody who's passionate about building fantastic culture, I just absolutely loved that book. I've recommended it a number of times, bought it for a number of people. And I think if I had to pick a third one, another book that I have probably bought and given away to more members of my team than anything is How Women Rise.
How Women Rise.
Yeah. And it's a book about, empowering women in the workplace and in their personal lives to just be confident enough to ask for more and push for more and believe that you are capable of more than what society tells you are.
So I think it goes without remiss. This is off script now. Don't know what kind of answers we'll get. What are some of your all-time favorite books ever? And you just have to say.
Okay, so again, going back to the conversation around storytelling, I love a great story. I also do not read fiction-based books. Like, if it's not a business book and I'm not learning something, I'm just not interested. So yeah, Lord of the Rings, never read it. Harry Potter, never read it, not interested. So the books for me, I think that stand out the most are those are founder stories and brand stories. So Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, that's just a classic. You also have Pour Your Heart Into It by Howard Schultz, the story of Starbucks.
Yeah.
You have A Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger and his journey with Disney. You also have Without Their Permission, which is Reddit founder Alexis Ohanian. So those types, I think, are really probably my absolute favorites.
It's funny because Nick Telson, he also mentioned Shoe Dog.
Yeah.
But there was another, Pete, I think who's season guest number 2, he hated Shoe Dog.
Really?
So it's kind of contrasting. Sadly, I've actually not, it's in my list, but it's something I've been meaning to read. And the books he mentioned.
I could not put it down. I blitzed through the whole book. It was so fantastic.
I think I'm going to get it for Christmas, and actually, because it's been in my list for a long time, and I've read a few of the other books you've mentioned. When you mentioned the founder of Patagonia, there was a founder of Tom's, Blake Mike Cozy, I think his name was. And I've been gifted this book a couple of times, and I've given it away to people as well. And it's one of these books that I started at. You kind of hear about his story, how he, buy one, give one away, that kind of thing really chimed with me. Building something that's important and, kind of really giving your life's work to something. Similar to how you kind of came about with the Substack that you're kind of running, I guess. You found a passion that you couldn't kind of not do something about. So
it's interesting because, like I've always said, I'm not the ideas person. I'm not the one that comes up with the business idea. I'm the one that helps execute it and bring it to life. When I stumbled upon something that was like, I was so emphatically passionate about it, and when I really assessed my skill sets, my background, the experiences I've had in my personal and professional life, like the culmination of it all was like, I should do this. And, any anybody that you speak to, whether or not it's a founder or it's an investor or anybody who has worked within the startup ecosystem, will say, don't start a business unless you're absolutely passionate about it. The highs will be fantastic, but the lows will be so severe and so significant that if you don't have unwavering passion for the thing that you're building and the problem that you're solving, it won't be worth it, because you'll just give up.
Yeah. Again, more topics we should definitely have on your podcast. The next question, this could be non-marketing or business related, but what are 3 must-listen to podcasts that you...
Oh, that's easy, actually, because there are 3 that I have on constant rotation. One, I highly recommend for anybody who is in B2B marketing, especially. It's the Exit 5 podcast by Dave Gerhardt. I recommend both his podcasts, but then also too, he has like a B2B marketing community as well that you can subscribe to. And I think he's got just over about 3,000 B2B marketers inside of this community, and that he interviews on his podcast. And it is just a complete education and crash course into all things B2B marketing. Like, I, again, walk my dog every single morning listening to a different podcast, and his always gets, the creative juices flowing for the day. That's the first one. The second one is an obsession of mine, which it's actually called Founders. It's by a gentleman whom is near and dear to me, David Senra. So he's an OG friend from back in Florida.
You know David?
Oh, very well. Yeah, his brother and I go way back. And so I'm hyper obsessed with his podcast. I mean, he just really deep dives into the lives and the careers of so many insanely successful individuals. Again, rest in peace, Charlie Munger. He's done quite a number of pieces on Charlie Munger. I actually just put up a post about it today. But yeah, David's just research and knowledge on the topic of these founders and who he actually brings to life in his podcast. I'm just thoroughly obsessed. And then the third one is going to be a little bit controversial, because I think people either love him or hate him and his podcast, but what's undeniable is just what he's been able to build and the caliber of guests. So it's A Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. Yeah. Again, like, I massively love just like reading and learning about like psychology and health, wellness, nutrition, all of this. And I find a large majority of the guests that he has on there kind of fall within that landscape. And so again, that's just like a complete education every single morning that I take on that podcast. And, I know a lot of people don't love an hour to 2 hour podcast, but I spend the time walking my dog listening to a podcast. And like I said, it just stimulates my brain and it really gets my creative juices flowing. It gets my brain thinking and it sets me up for a great day ahead.
Well, one thing is I actually literally just discovered Founders podcast.
Oh.
And I think I've consumed, just like inhaled, so as many episodes as I can. And yeah, for anyone who's who's a book reader, but also is interested in the world of setting up companies and really persevering, and he goes into so much detail about every kind of business that a book that he researches. He goes into depth, and it's probably one of my top 5 podcasts actually. So it's
hands down.
It's deep.
Hands down.
Going away from the world of podcasts, what are 3 SaaS tools that you cannot live without?
So this has massively changed in sort of the change in trajectory of my career most recently. I would say obviously the number one will come as no surprise, like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone, especially in the realm of marketing, who isn't utilizing it, whether that's for ideation or conceptualizing or things like that. So ChatGPT is number 1. Number 2, I would probably say, is Whimsical. And Whimsical is like a collaboration tool for teams and individuals for wireframing, for flowcharting, for mapping, and things like that. So again, as I've been thinking about like how big do I build this project, it's been fantastic to just wireframe out ideas and flowcharts and things like that. I've used it for years and years and years. In fact, so many people that have worked with me have been like, are you getting paid? Like, are you an ambassador of Whimsical? Because you talk about it all the time. It's just a fantastic tool. And then the third I would probably say is SparkToro. So that's a fantastic SaaS tool that the legendary OG SEO Rand Fishkin has built. Basically, you can do crazy amounts of audience and customer research, and it really has been very, very beneficial, both in the project that I'm building right now, but then secondarily as well for several of the organizations that I advise. I mean, just really helping them get a better grip on where their customers are playing, what their customers are talking about, where they're learning, where they're consuming their content and information has been massively helpful.
Oh, fantastic. Just out of interest, do you actually use SparkToro to come up with topics for what you write about on your Substack?
No, because if I did that, my Substack would be incredibly long, and it's already pretty long as it is. I need to figure out how to shorten it, actually. So I haven't actually leveraged it for my own personal stuff just yet, but I will in the future for sure. It's in the cards.
Perfect. And it's a tool that I've recently discovered, but I haven't really delved into it. So I'd love to kind of pick your brains about how to
absolutely.
how to use it, how to get the best out of it. You've mentioned a couple of people on podcasts that you follow, but are there any individuals that you kind of get inspired by?
Yes. Let me see right now, probably because she's top of mind. She was my unstoppable female founder last week, Verena Passad. She is an incredible entrepreneur and investor based out of Berlin. And she is literally just a woman who has proven that you can have and do it all. So I've been really fascinated and really enamored and inspired by so many of the things that she's been doing with advocating for children's education and making education accessible to every single child. She's so many fantastic initiatives around that. She's a really big advocate on the social political stage inside of Berlin for advancing the entire startup ecosystem for the German market and being able to economically push the country forward. So again, like, she's just got her hands in all of these different pies, and I just really, really admire her. Dave Gerhardt, I massively follow, not only again because of his podcast, but just he's absolutely on it. He's a brilliant CMO. He has been there and done it when it comes to building, scaling, and exiting startups. So from a marketing side of things, like, I really enjoy following Dave. Somebody else that I have had for many of years now, a little bit of a girl crush on. Her name is Brittany Mueller. So she is a brilliant expert in all things machine learning, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and search engine optimization. Wow. She has just incredibly inspired me, and I've found her and all of the research that she's done wildly fascinating. And then trying to think, like I said, Robbie Crabtree's great with his storytelling. Yep. And then probably the other person that I really follow a lot and read a lot of their content is Justin Welsh with the Saturday Solopreneur. So he's all about helping to empower, inspire, and provide knowledge and tools for other individuals who are wanting to launch a business and kind of go out on their own.
I think when I follow you on Twitter, and you kind of repost a lot of your stuff, so that's how I kind of find out about Justin.
You know, when you like follow somebody and every single piece of content that they put out, you're just like, I feel so seen. I feel like that tweet or that LinkedIn post or that piece of content was written just for me. I felt like that about Justin for so long, and I think reading his content that inspires people to just take that leap of faith on themselves and launch that business was also, I think, one of the things that kind of inspired me to finally hit that publish button on that Substack.
Wow, that's very inspirational.
Yeah.
Final words that you want to leave are predominantly marketing managers or guests or people who've come in for marriage counseling advice accidentally.
I mean, we have covered the gamut.
I think, you know, you have worn many different hats in your career, and also from the sounds of it, this is the very, very early beginning of Unstoppable Female Founders. Are there any final words of wisdom or anything that you want to leave our listeners or people who are watching this with?
I think the biggest thing is that, we live in a day and age where anything and everything is possible. And so I think final words would be just fuck it, swing for the fences, go big, go bold. Like, nothing is out of reach, nothing is too big or ambitious. The mountain might be high and it might be tough to climb, but the reward will really, really be worth it on the other side.
Perfect. On that note, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
And we will see you at the next one.